Just minutes before his wedding, Michael Carter discovered something that changed everything. The guests were seated. The cameras were waiting. The world expected a fairy tale. But what happened next was something no one saw coming. And what no one knew was that this wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of the real one. The skyline glittered like scattered diamonds as twilight descended over the city. From the balcony of the Horizon Tower, Michael Carter looked out at the world he had built with his own hands. A world of innovation, discipline, and purpose. At just 33, he had risen from a humble background to become one of the most influential young entrepreneurs in the tech industry. Beside him stood Rose Lambert, radiant, elegant, and effortlessly charming. Her laughter was soft and melodic, carrying through the evening breeze like music. She looked at Michael as though he were her universe, and for a long time, he believed he truly was hers too. They were the couple everyone envied. The media called them the golden pair. She was beautiful and sophisticated. He was brilliant and humble. Their engagement under the Paris lights had made headlines. Their love story was the kind that sold magazines and made strangers believe in fairy tales again. As the wedding date approached, the world waited. The ceremony was set to take place in a luxurious vineyard estate overlooking the Mediterranean. Private, breathtaking, and symbolic of everything Michael and Rose represented. But beneath the glamour, not everyone believed in the perfection they projected. Michael's best friend, Liam, had his doubts. "You sure about this?" Liam had asked one evening as they sat on the rooftop of Michael's company building. Michael had laughed it off. "You've never trusted anyone I dated." Liam shook his head. "No, man. This feels different. Rose is charming, but there's something in her eyes when you're not around. Like she's acting in a play only she knows the ending to." Michael brushed the warning aside. Rose had been nothing but kind and affectionate. She visited his office, supported his charity foundation, and even joined him on the trips to orphanages he sponsored. She seemed perfect, but perfection, as Michael would soon learn, often hides the deepest cracks. The night before the wedding, he couldn't sleep. The stars outside seemed distant, their glow dimmed by a strange unease in his chest. He tried to convince himself it was just nerves, that every groom felt this way before a big day. He had no idea that fate was counting down, and in less than 24 hours, 5 minutes before he said, "I do," his world would crumble. The morning sun rose gently over the vineyards, painting the sky with shades of gold and coral. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. The air was filled with the scent of roses and lavender, the sound of string instruments drifting through the estate as guests began to arrive. Michael stood in his suite, adjusting the cuffs of his white shirt. His tuxedo hung neatly on the wardrobe door, and beside it sat the silver wedding bands, shining with promise. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm the storm building in his chest. "Big day, huh?" Liam said from across the room, trying to lighten the mood. Michael smiled faintly. "The biggest." Liam studied his friend for a moment. "You look nervous. Every man should be before a lifetime decision." Michael replied with a soft laugh, but his laugh didn't reach his eyes. When Liam left to coordinate with the wedding planner, Michael decided to take a quiet walk through the hallways. One last moment to clear his head before everything began. The estate was quiet, the distant chatter of guests muffled behind closed doors. Then, as he passed the bridal suite, something made him pause. The door was slightly open, just enough for a voice to slip through. A familiar one. It was Rose. "Oh my God," she said between bursts of laughter. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this." Another voice joined in. One of her bridesmaids, probably Eliza. "Girl, you're insane. 2 men in 1 month and now you're marrying a millionaire? You should win an Oscar for this performance." Michael froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. Rose laughed again, the sound sharp, cruel. Please. They were just fun. Michael will never find out. The man's too kind for his own good. Once I get that ring, everything changes. He'll give me the life I've always wanted. The laughter that followed felt like a knife twisting in Michael's chest. For a moment the world around him blurred. The flowers, the sunlight, the music. Everything dimmed into silence. He pressed a trembling hand against the wall, his breath uneven. No, he had to be wrong. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a joke, a cruel prank. But Rose's next words shattered every hope he clung to. I swear, she said, still laughing. If kindness made money, Michael would be the richest man alive. Lucky for me, he already is. Her bridesmaids laughed again, a chorus of betrayal. Michael took a slow step back. His throat burned. His chest felt like it was collapsing. The woman he had chosen to love, to trust, to marry, was mocking him behind a half-open door. He could have stormed in. He could have confronted her right there. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was disbelief. Or maybe it was the quiet voice in his soul that whispered, "Not yet." His eyes hardened. The pain in his chest transformed into something sharper. Not rage, not sorrow, but clarity. He walked away from that door with steady steps. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to fight. He was going to show her, and everyone else, what it looked like when a man who built his empire from nothing refused to be broken. And what Michael did at the altar would make the world stop. The estate was alive with elegance. Rows of white chairs faced an altar draped in silk and orchids. Cameramen moved quietly between guests, dressed in designer suits and pastel gowns. Every detail was picture perfect, the kind of beauty money could buy. The wedding of Michael Carter and Rose Lambert was trending before it even began. The ceremony was being live-streamed by celebrity outlets, and social media was flooded with the hashtag Josh Rose and Michael Forever. But while the world watched a fairy tale, Michael stood under the archway feeling like a ghost inside his own story. The air around him buzzed with chatter. His mother smiled proudly from the front row. His investors whispered about how lucky he was to have found a woman like Rose. Only Liam, standing as best man, noticed the faint tremor in Michael's hand. "You okay?" Liam whispered. Michael's gaze didn't waver from the aisle. "I will be." Then the music began. Everyone stood as Rose appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in her pearl-white gown. The veil caught the sunlight like a halo. Her father walked beside her, beaming with pride. She looked every bit the perfect bride, confident, graceful, untouchable. But when she reached the altar and placed her hand in Michael's, she didn't notice the calm storm in his eyes. He smiled. A smile so controlled it could have been carved from stone. The officiant began, his voice deep and warm. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Rose Lambert and Michael Carter." The words drifted through the air like a melody. But Michael wasn't listening. His mind replayed Rose's laughter, her voice saying, "He'll never find out." Then came the moment that would live forever. The one sentence that broke the silence of perfection. "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony," the officiant said, "speak now, or forever hold your peace." A hush fell over the crowd. The music faded. Cameras zoomed in. Then Michael spoke, calmly, clearly. "Yes," he said, "I have a reason." Gasps rippled through the audience like thunder. The officiant blinked, confused. Rose's smile faltered, the color draining from her cheeks. Michael turned to the guests, his voice steady, every word slicing through the air like glass. "I want to thank you all for being here. I know everyone came to celebrate love. But love, real love, deserves honesty. And 5 minutes ago, I found out the woman I was about to marry doesn't believe in that." A murmur spread across the vineyard. Phones lifted, recording. Cameras zoomed closer. Michael continued, his tone never rising. "I heard my bride laughing with her friends about how she slept with 2 men last month, and that she's marrying me for my money." There was a collective gasp, sharp, brutal, echoing through the open air. Rose's lips parted in panic. "Michael, no, it's not—" He held up a hand, calm, composed. "Please, don't insult me further." He took a step back and removed the platinum ring from his pocket. "I was going to give you my heart, my trust, and my name. But I've realized something. You don't deserve any of them." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to pause. Michael placed the ring gently on the altar and looked straight into the cameras. "To anyone watching, don't mistake kindness for weakness, and don't confuse silence for blindness." Then he turned and walked down the aisle alone. Every guest was frozen. Rose stood at the altar, tears streaking down her flawless makeup, her dream wedding collapsing around her. By the time Michael reached the gates, his story was already spreading online. Within an hour, the headline flashed across every platform. "Millionaire calls off wedding after catching bride's betrayal," in front of everyone. But what the world didn't know was that the most powerful part of Michael's story hadn't even begun yet. The world didn't stop for Michael Carter, but it certainly slowed down. Clips of the wedding had flooded social media. The moment he said, "She slept with 2 men," was replayed, captioned, analyzed, and turned into countless short videos. Some called him a hero. Others called it humiliation. But none of that mattered to him. Michael wasn't thinking about headlines. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about silence. The kind that feels like standing in the middle of a storm with no sound at all. He didn't stay to face anyone. He left the vineyard quietly, refusing the limousine waiting for him, refusing even to answer Liam's calls. He just walked, past the gardens, past the flashing cameras, past everything he had once believed in. He drove himself until the road ended at a small coastal town 2 hours away. Marin Bay, a place forgotten by time. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, wild and gray, waves crashing against jagged rocks like a symphony of sorrow. He booked a small room in a seaside inn. Nothing fancy, nothing polished. The owner, an old woman with kind eyes, didn't recognize him, or pretended not to. She handed him the keys with a quiet smile. "People come here to disappear," she said softly. "Maybe that's what I need." He replied. For the first time in years, Michael turned off his phone. No messages, no calls, no noise. Just the sound of the sea outside his window. That night, he sat by the balcony, watching the waves crash in the distance. His heart felt like glass shards pressed against his ribs. He remembered Rose's voice, the laughter, the words that had burned themselves into his mind. He'll never find out. He clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. He wanted to hate her, but all he felt was emptiness. He had loved her, honestly, deeply, and that was his tragedy. Days turned into weeks. Michael barely spoke. He walked along the beach at dawn, the salt wind cutting across his face. He started sketching again, something he hadn't done since college. He painted the ocean, the cliffs, the birds, anything that helped him breathe again. And slowly, without realizing it, the noise inside him began to quiet. He thought of what Liam once told him. "Some storms don't come to destroy you. They come to clear your path." It was becoming true. The scandal had stripped him of illusion, but also of everything fake around him. Rose's betrayal had gone viral, but so had his strength. Thousands of messages poured in when the world realized the truth. People calling him an inspiration, a symbol of self-respect. But he didn't reply. He didn't need validation. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky gold, Michael realized something simple yet powerful. He hadn't lost his future. He had only lost what was never real. That day he made a silent vow. Not to become bitter. Not to close his heart forever, but to rebuild, quietly, in his own way. Because the greatest revenge wasn't hate, it was healing. And as the waves crashed against the rocks below, Michael Carter began the slow, steady journey back to himself. It happened on a Tuesday, a quiet one, the kind where the sky hung low and the sea whispered secrets to the shore. Michael had grown used to solitude by then. Mornings spent walking the coastline, afternoons sketching in a small notebook, evenings watching the sunset melt into the ocean. It wasn't happiness, but it was peace. And for now, that was enough. He stopped by the small cafe near the harbor every morning. It was called Seabird's Nest, a humble little place with blue-painted windows and the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon. The owner, a cheerful man in his 50s, never asked questions. He just smiled and said, "The usual," every day. But that morning was different. As Michael sat by the window sketching the waves, a voice floated through the soft jazz playing in the background. Gentle, low, unpretentious. "Excuse me," the voice said. "Is this seat taken?" He looked up. A woman stood before him holding a mug of coffee and a book tucked under her arm. She wasn't glamorous like Rose. No diamonds, no makeup. Just simple beauty. Her brown hair was tied in a loose bun, and her eyes carried warmth. The kind that made people feel seen, not judged. He gestured to the seat. "Go ahead," she smiled, her lips curving softly. "Thanks. The other tables are full." They sat in silence for a while. She read, and he sketched. But something about her presence made the room feel lighter. When she laughed softly at a line in her book, Michael found himself smiling. The first genuine smile in weeks. After a few minutes, she looked at his sketchbook. "You draw?" "Just a hobby," he said. She leaned closer. "That's beautiful," he shrugged. "It's nothing." "It's something," she said, her tone simple but sincere. There was a pause. Then she extended her hand. "I'm Elena," she said. He hesitated for a second before replying, "Michael." She tilted her head slightly. "You sound like a man who's trying to remember who he is." Her words startled him. He laughed quietly. "Something like that." She smiled knowingly, took a sip of her coffee and said, "Then maybe the sea brought you here for a reason." After that day, they began to see each other often. Not deliberately, but naturally. Some mornings she'd already be at the cafe, reading or writing in her notebook. Other times they'd meet while walking the beach, stopping to talk about small things. Books, music, or the smell of rain before a storm. Or, Elena was a writer. She had come to Marin Bay to finish a novel she'd been working on for years. "City noise makes me forget who I am," she'd said once. "So I came where the ocean could remind me." Michael found peace in her simplicity. She never asked about his past. She saw him, not the millionaire, not the broken groom. Just the man sitting quietly by the sea. One evening they watched the sunset together in silence. The sky bled gold and violet. Elena turned to him and said, "You know, people think healing means forgetting what hurt you. But sometimes healing means learning to carry it differently." Michael looked at her. Really looked at her. The calm in her eyes, the strength in her quiet voice. And for the first time since that disastrous wedding, he felt something flicker inside him. Not love, not yet, but hope. Days in Marin Bay began to fall into rhythm. The soft kind that doesn't demand anything. Morning walks by the water, quiet afternoons at Seabird's Nest, evenings spent sketching the horizon that never looked the same twice. Elena was there through most of it. Never too close, never too far. She didn't push him to talk, but her silence had a strange way of inviting honesty. One gray afternoon, they sat on a wooden bench overlooking the sea. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and rain. Elena's hair fluttered in the breeze as she sipped her coffee, wrapped in a cream-colored shawl. Michael watched the waves roll in and out, steady and endless, like the ache inside his chest. "Do you ever feel like the sea listens?" he asked quietly. Elena smiled. "It always does. But it doesn't answer right away. It waits until you're ready to hear." He nodded, staring at the horizon. For a moment he said nothing. Then the words came. Rough, unsteady, like a dam cracking open. "I was supposed to get married 3 months ago." Elena didn't react, didn't gasp or ask questions. She simply turned her face toward him, listening. "She said she loved me," he continued. "Everyone believed it. I believed it. But 5 minutes before the ceremony, I heard her laughing with her friends, saying she'd been with 2 other men, that she only wanted me for my money." He paused. His throat tightened. "I still hear that laughter sometimes. It's like it echoes inside my head." Elena stayed quiet. Her silence was soft, not heavy. It made it easier for him to go on. "I walked away in front of everyone. Cameras, guests, the whole world watching. I thought it would make me feel strong, but it didn't. It just hurt." He exhaled shakily, the memory still raw. "I keep asking myself how I didn't see it, how I could have loved someone who never loved me." Elena's gaze softened. "Because you saw what she pretended to be, not who she really was. That doesn't make you blind. It makes you human." Michael looked at her, eyes wet, but not from weakness, from release. "I don't even know if I can trust anyone again." She placed her cup down and said gently, "Then don't. Not until you're ready. But don't close the door completely. Leave it a little open for light to come in." The wind brushed between them. Somewhere in the distance, the tide hit the rocks with a rhythmic crash. Michael leaned back and let the sound of the sea fill the silence. For the first time since that day at the altar, he didn't feel the need to hide the pain. He let it exist, out in the open, no longer buried under pride or anger. Elena didn't offer comfort in words. She just sat beside him, her shoulder barely touching his, steady as the tide. And in that quiet, something small but powerful shifted inside Michael. The pain didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. That night, back in his room, he opened his sketchbook and drew. Not the ocean, not the cliffs, but Elena. Her calm expression, the wind in her hair, her eyes that seemed to understand even what he didn't say. When he was done, he looked at the drawing and smiled faintly. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering without breaking. And with that realization, for the first time in months, Michael slept without dreaming of the altar. Peace doesn't last forever. Sometimes the world you've left behind finds its way back to you, even when you've done everything to stay hidden. It had been nearly 6 months since the wedding that never was. Marin Bay had become Michael's sanctuary. The whispers of the ocean, the scent of salt in the morning air, and Elena's calm presence had all helped him rebuild himself, piece by piece. But one morning, everything shifted. He was sitting at his favorite spot near the cafe, sketching the harbor, when Liam's name appeared on his phone. A call he hadn't expected to ever answer. After a long pause, he picked up. "Michael." Liam's voice was steady but urgent. "I finally found you." Michael sighed, half smiling. "You sound like I was hiding from the police. In a way, you were hiding. From everything," Liam said softly. "Look, man, I get it. You needed time. But it's time to come back." "Come back to what?" Michael asked quietly. "Your life," Liam replied. "Your company, your people. The board's been asking about you. The world hasn't forgotten what happened, but they've turned it into something else now. You're a symbol, Mike. People are calling you the man who walked away from lies and built himself again." Michael said nothing. His eyes drifted to the sea, waves colliding against the rocks. "I'm not sure I want to be a symbol, Liam. I just want peace." Liam hesitated. "And maybe you found it, but the world needs your voice now. Not as the man who was betrayed, but as the man who stood tall after it. After the call ended, Michael sat quietly, his phone heavy in his hand. For the first time in months, he thought about the city, the bright lights, the noise, the life he had walked away from. That evening, he told Elena about the call. They sat by the shore, their feet buried in the cool sand, the sun melting into the horizon. "Do you miss it?" she asked softly. "I don't know," he admitted. "That world used to be my dream, but now it feels distant, like it belonged to someone else." Elena traced patterns in the sand with her fingers. "Maybe it still belongs to you, just not the same way. Maybe you're supposed to go back and rebuild it differently." He looked at her, the wind brushing her hair across her face. "You think so?" She nodded. "You built something that changed lives once. Maybe now you can build something that heals them." Her words stayed with him. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat by the window staring at the ocean. The same ocean that had healed him, now asking him to let go. By morning, he made a decision. He packed his sketchbook, his laptop, and one of Elena's favorite books. A gift she had slipped into his bag with a note that read, "Don't forget who you've become here." When he drove away from Marin Bay, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw Elena standing on the pier, her shawl fluttering in the wind. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. They both knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning disguised as goodbye. And as the city skyline reappeared in the distance, glittering under the morning sun, Michael Carter felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. This time he wasn't coming back to prove anything. He was coming back to begin again. The city looked the same. Tall towers of glass, traffic humming like restless waves, people moving fast, chasing time. But to Michael Carter, everything felt different. He drove through familiar streets that once symbolized success and power. Now they felt like memories, echoes of a man he used to be. The noise didn't intimidate him anymore. The pressure didn't suffocate him. The city hadn't changed, but he had. When he arrived at his company headquarters, the guards froze for a moment, then straightened in surprise. "Mr. Carter, welcome back, sir." Michael smiled faintly. "Thank you." Inside, whispers spread like wildfire. Employees who had only seen him on news screens now saw him in person again. The man who had disappeared after the most public heartbreak of the decade. He walked into the top-floor boardroom, where Liam and the executive team were waiting. The room went silent as he entered. Liam stood first. "Welcome home." Michael nodded, his gaze calm, composed. "It's good to be back." The meeting began, filled with numbers, reports, and projections. But Michael barely looked at the charts. When it was his turn to speak, he closed the folders before him and said quietly, "I didn't come back for profits. I came back for purpose." Confused glances exchanged across the table. He continued, "We built this company to connect people, to innovate, to make life better. Somewhere along the way, it became about power. I want to change that. From today, we're starting something new. A foundation under this company's name, to fund young entrepreneurs who can't afford a chance." Liam smiled faintly. He had seen that look before, the look Michael got when his heart was set on something. "You're serious about this?" he asked. Michael nodded. "Dead serious. The world saw me walk away from a lie. Now I want them to see me build something true." Word spread quickly. Michael Carter returns with a new vision. For the first time, people weren't talking about the scandal. They were talking about change. Later that evening, as Michael stood on his office balcony watching the sunset over the skyline, Liam joined him. "You know," Liam said quietly, "you look different." Michael smirked. "Older?" "Wiser," Liam replied. "And happier, maybe." Michael didn't answer right away. He thought of Marin Bay, of the waves, the quiet mornings, and Elena's calm voice saying, "Don't forget who you've become here." "I'm not sure I'm happy yet," he said at last. "But I'm at peace, and that's a good start." As night fell over the city, Michael realized something beautiful. He hadn't returned to reclaim the past. He had returned to redefine it. He no longer cared about headlines or high society. He cared about meaning, about what he could give, not what he could gain. But destiny wasn't done with him yet, because 1 month later, at a small charity gala hosted by his foundation, Michael was talking to a group of students about their startup ideas when something, or someone, caught his eye near the doorway. At first he thought his mind was playing tricks, but then he saw her, Elena. She looked just as she did in Marin Bay, simple, graceful, untouched by the chaos of the city. Her loose brown hair fell over her shoulders, and in her hands, she carried a box of donated books. Their eyes met, and in the middle of laughter, music, and clinking glasses, time seemed to stop. The event was warm and genuine, no media frenzy, no grand speeches, just hope, soft lights, and people who believed in second chances. It was Michael's first public appearance since his return, his first step into the world he was rebuilding. Elena stepped forward with a faint smile. "I didn't know billionaires carried boxes," she said gently. Michael returned the smile, something in him finally breathing again. "And I didn't know writers appeared without warning." She laughed, quietly, sincerely. "One of the volunteers told me about the literacy project. I came to help. I just didn't realize this was your foundation." He studied her for a moment, almost afraid she'd vanish like a memory. "You always find me when I least expect it. And you," she said softly, "always look like you're holding up the world. Though tonight, you seem lighter." Michael's expression softened. "Maybe someone taught me how to put it down." For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stood there, two people surrounded by noise and celebration, yet wrapped in a silence only they could hear. Later that evening, when the event ended, Michael found Elena sitting outside on the steps of the hall, her notebook resting on her knees. He joined her, the city lights painting golden lines across the pavement. "You really built something beautiful," she said without looking up. "Thanks to people like you," he replied. She tilted her head. "I didn't do much. You did," he said softly. "You helped me remember who I was." A silence followed, not heavy, just full, the kind of silence that says everything words can't. Finally, she asked, "So what now, Michael Carter? You've rebuilt your empire, faced the world, and found peace. What's left?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "Maybe it's not about what's left," he said. "Maybe it's about who's still here." Elena's lips curved into a small smile. "You mean the woman who once told you not to close the door too tight?" He chuckled quietly. "Yeah, turns out she was right." The city hummed around them. The night was cool, the stars faint but visible between the buildings. And as the sound of traffic faded into the distance, Michael reached out, slowly, carefully, and took her hand. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rushed. It was quiet, honest and real, the kind of connection that didn't need vows or rings to be understood. For the first time since the day his world fell apart, Michael Carter didn't feel broken. He felt found. Love didn't rush back into Michael's life. It tiptoed. No fireworks, no headlines, no grand gestures. Just quiet mornings, warm smiles, and the feeling of peace that came when two people existed comfortably in each other's silence. After the charity event, Michael and Elena began to see each other again. Slowly, gently. Sometimes they'd meet at the cafe near the park, where the smell of roasted coffee beans mixed with the hum of city life. Other times they'd walk by the riverside at dusk, talking about small things, books, art, life. There were no questions about the past, no judgments, no comparisons. Elena never mentioned Rose. She never needed to. Her silence was enough to remind Michael that he no longer had to explain who he was or where he'd been. He found himself telling her about his childhood, how he used to sell computer parts from his mother's kitchen, how his father's death pushed him to work harder than anyone his age. Elena listened with the kind of attention that made every word feel valued. And when she spoke about her writing, the novel she'd been struggling to finish for years, Michael encouraged her the way no one else had. "You have a voice people need to hear," he told her one evening. "Don't let fear mute it." She smiled at him then, a small, grateful smile. "Funny," she said. "That's exactly what you once needed to hear, too." Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened, not in drama, but in comfort. They cooked dinner together in his apartment, laughing over burned pasta and mismatched plates. They watched movies in silence, the kind that didn't need commentary. Sometimes Elena would read aloud while Michael sketched her, capturing the calm strength in her features. One evening, rain poured outside as thunder rumbled softly in the distance. They sat by the window, wrapped in blankets, sharing tea. Elena turned to him and asked quietly, "Do you ever think about her?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to. It's strange. I don't feel anger anymore, just gratitude." "Gratitude?" she repeated softly. He smiled faintly. "If she hadn't broken me, I wouldn't have learned how to heal right. And I wouldn't have met you." Elena's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. She reached out and held his hand, firm, steady. Outside lightning flashed, but inside the room, there was peace. Michael realized then that love didn't have to be loud to be real. It didn't need an audience or perfect timing or promises shouted to the sky. Sometimes it was as simple as sitting beside someone who made you feel safe in your own silence. As the rain slowed and the city lights shimmered through the window, Elena rested her head on his shoulder. Michael closed his eyes, breathing her in. The scent of ink, rain, and warmth. For the first time in a long time, he didn't think about tomorrow. He didn't think about what the world expected from him. He just thought about this. This quiet moment, this woman, this peace. And deep in his heart, he knew. This wasn't a new chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new story. It was a quiet Friday morning when the past found its way back. Michael had just finished a meeting with his foundation team. The day was bright, the office filled with energy and life. He was packing his laptop when Liam walked in, his expression unreadable. "There's someone downstairs asking to see you," Liam said carefully. Michael didn't look up. "A journalist?" "No," Liam said softly. "It's Rose." The sound of her name froze him for a moment. It had been nearly a year since that day at the altar. A year since he'd heard her voice, since he'd seen the face that once meant everything. For a long time he said nothing. Then quietly he replied, "Send her up." When the elevator doors opened, time seemed to slow. Rose stepped out, dressed simply in a beige coat, her hair tied back. Gone was the glamour, the flawless perfection. She looked different, older, thinner, softer. "Hi, Michael," she said, her voice trembling. "Rose." They stood in silence for a few seconds, the air heavy but not hostile. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she began. "I just needed to say a few things before I could move on." Michael nodded. "Go ahead." She looked down, her hands twisting nervously. "After the wedding, everything fell apart. The media destroyed me. The people I thought were my friends vanished. My reputation, my career, all gone. I blamed you for a while, but the truth is, I did it to myself." Michael listened quietly. She wasn't the woman he remembered. The arrogance, the confidence, all gone. "I know an apology can't undo anything," she continued, her eyes wet. "But I am sorry for everything. I didn't love you the way you deserved. I didn't even know what love was. You did. You were real. I wasn't." Michael looked at her for a long time. He didn't feel the anger he expected, only understanding. "Thank you," he said simply. Rose blinked. That's it? He smiled faintly. That's all that's needed. I forgave you long before this moment, Rose. Not for you. For me. She let out a shaky breath. You've changed. I had to, he said softly. Pain will do that. For a moment, her eyes softened. A flicker of genuine relief. I heard about your foundation, she said. You're doing something good. I'm glad you turned it into something beautiful, Michael nodded. We all get a second chance, Rose. It's just about what we do with it. She smiled. Small, tired, but real. You found someone, didn't you? He hesitated, then nodded once. She must be special, Rose whispered. She is, he replied. Not because she's perfect, but because she's real. They stood quietly by the window, sunlight streaming in. Finally, Rose took a deep breath. Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, Rose. When she left, Michael didn't feel pain. He didn't feel nostalgia. He felt peace. The kind that comes when a story finally closes. That evening, he met Elena at their favorite riverside cafe. She noticed the calm in his eyes and smiled. You saw her, she said, reading him easily. I did, he replied. And I realized I don't hate her, he said. And I don't love her either. I just wish her peace. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. That means you've healed. Michael squeezed her hand gently. No, he said. It means we healed. As the city lights shimmered across the water, Michael understood that the past wasn't something to erase. It was something to outgrow. And he finally had. The evening was calm, the sky painted with streaks of violet and silver. The city below glimmered like 1,000 scattered stars, and a cool breeze drifted through the rooftop terrace of Michael's apartment. It had been a year since he'd walked away from the altar, and everything about his life felt different now. Quieter, softer, honest. He stood at the balcony, hands in his pockets, watching the night settle. Behind him, laughter floated from the kitchen where Elena was finishing dinner. She'd insisted on cooking for him tonight. Her way of celebrating the release of her first book, which had just been published. When she appeared at the doorway, the soft light from the dining room haloed her. She wore a simple white dress that swayed gently as she walked. No diamonds, no heels. Just herself, effortlessly beautiful. Dinner's ready, she said, smiling. Michael turned toward her, his heart swelling. I don't deserve you, you know. Elena laughed lightly. We've been through this before. You don't have to earn love, Michael. You just have to receive it. They ate by candlelight, music playing softly in the background. An old jazz record Elena loved. Between bites and laughter, Michael felt an ache. Not of sadness, but of certainty. After dinner, they stepped onto the balcony. The night sky stretched endlessly above them. Stars blinked faintly against the darkness like quiet witnesses. Elena leaned against the railing, her hair swaying in the wind. You ever think about how strange life is? She asked. How so? How something that once broke you, she said softly, can become the reason you find what's real. Michael smiled. I think about it every day. Then he reached into his pocket, slowly, deliberately, and took out a small box. Elena turned, her eyes widening slightly. Michael. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. No diamonds, no glitter, just a single delicate band. The same kind of ring he'd once left behind, but this time, it wasn't a symbol of illusion. It was a promise of truth. He took her hand, his voice steady but tender. Elena, when I met you, I was a man running from everything, from pain, from trust, from myself. You didn't try to fix me. You just sat beside me until I remembered who I was. You taught me that love isn't about perfection or promises shouted from rooftops. It's about peace, the kind that feels like home. Tears welled in her eyes, glistening in the starlight. He continued, his thumb brushing her knuckles. I don't want a grand ceremony. I don't want cameras or guests or champagne. I just want you, to wake up beside you, to build a quiet life filled with meaning, not noise. So, Elena Harper." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "Will you marry me?" For a moment the world went still. Elena pressed her lips together, her eyes shimmering with emotion. Then she nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Yes, Michael. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, laughing through her tears. The city lights sparkled below them, the stars glowing faintly above. They didn't need applause. They didn't need witnesses. They had the night, the wind, and the kind of love that didn't need to prove itself to anyone. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Michael whispered against her hair, "I walked away from one altar broken. But this time, I'm walking toward forever whole." Elena smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this time it's real." The stars shimmered brighter, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this moment. Not for perfection, but for peace finally found. The morning sky was soft and silver, the kind of sky that promised peace. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wild lavender and pine through the open garden, where rows of white chairs faced an old oak tree. There were no reporters, no designer gowns, no glittering chandeliers or flashing cameras. Just 50 people, friends, family, and those who had walked beside Michael and Elena through their quiet journey of rebuilding. The invitations had been handwritten, no calligraphy, no gold seals, just a single sentence at the bottom. "Come if you believe in second chances." Michael stood at the altar beneath the oak tree, wearing a dark linen suit, his heart calm and steady. He glanced around the small gathering, Liam smiling proudly from the front row, his mother wiping a tear, children chasing butterflies between the flowers. Everything about this moment was real. Then the music began. Not a grand orchestra, but a single cello playing softly in the breeze. When Elena appeared at the end of the aisle, the world seemed to pause. Her dress was simple, ivory cotton that flowed like sunlight on water. Her hair was loose, and in it, a small crown of dried wildflowers. No diamonds, no veil. Only honesty and grace. She walked down the aisle, her smile soft but full of light, and when she reached him, Michael took her hand, feeling that same quiet certainty he'd felt the night he proposed. The officiant, an old mentor of Michael's, stepped forward with a gentle smile. "There's no script for love," he began. "No perfect words, no perfect timing. Sometimes it breaks you before it builds you. But when it's true, it doesn't demand attention. It just stays." He turned to Michael. "Do you have your vows?" Michael nodded and unfolded a small worn piece of paper. His voice trembled slightly, but his eyes were clear. "I once stood at an altar believing love had to be perfect," he said. "I was wrong. Love isn't about grand promises. It's about small moments, the quiet mornings, the patience, the peace of being fully known and still chosen. Elena, you saw me when I was lost. You didn't try to change me. You simply waited until I could find myself again. So I vow this. I will love you not for what the world sees, but for what only we know. The honesty, the calm, the peace." Tears glistened in Elena's eyes as she unfolded her own vow. "When I met you," she said, her voice steady but tender, "you were standing in the ruins of what was. I didn't come to rebuild you. I came to remind you that you were never broken. Love isn't about saving someone. It's about walking beside them until they remember they were whole all along. So I vow to walk with you, Michael, not ahead, not behind, but beside you, always." The guests were silent. Even the breeze seemed to listen. The officiant smiled, closing his book. "By the power of love and honesty, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Michael leaned forward and kissed her, softly, reverently. There was no applause, no cheers. Just a long, beautiful silence filled with emotion. When they turned to face their guests, the world around them shimmered. Not in gold, but in warmth. Later that evening, as lanterns swayed in the trees and laughter echoed through the garden, Michael looked around the simple, imperfect celebration and smiled. Liam clinked glasses with him and whispered, "You did it, man. You found the real thing." Michael laughed. "No, Liam, it found me." As the night deepened, he stood with Elena beneath the same oak tree, watching fireflies flicker in the grass. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Does it feel different this time?" she asked softly. He looked up at the stars, quiet, endless, forgiving. "It feels right," he said, "because this time, I didn't find love at the altar. I found it in the healing." Elena smiled, her fingers intertwining with his. "And that," she whispered, "is where forever begins." The camera of the world had long stopped watching, but in that quiet corner of the earth, beneath a sky full of stars, Michael Carter finally got his happy ending. Not the one built on perfection, but the one born from truth. Michael didn't find love in a grand wedding. He found it later, in silence, in healing, and in the gentle heart of Elena. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to Folktales by Olivia for more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep watching.